Could Rashid Shaheed take that jump from being a good player for the Saints to a star in Clint Kubiak's offense? We'll talk about that right here on the Straight Up Saints podcast.
You're listening to the Straight Up Saints podcast.
What is up, Who Dat Nation? Welcome back inside another edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast. I'm your host, Chris Rosevoglu, and as always, we're brought to you by Scott Fickner, injury lawyers. You've been injured in any kind of accident, car, truck, 18-wheeler, or hurt offshore. Scott Fickner handles it all. You give him a call at 504-500-1111 for a free consultation. They'll always fight for the win. So Rashid Shaheed has really solidified himself, at least in New Orleans, as an exciting playmaker, a guy that Saints fans are really interested in watching week to week because of what he can do. I think he's the one player on the Saints that you feel like at any point in the game, he might go long for a touchdown due to his blazing speed. And look, right now, I think he's already solidified himself as a worthy receiver in this league, a guy that at the minimum is a wide receiver 3, although I do believe this is the perfect year for him to cement his status as one of the more dynamic wide receiver 2s in the NFL, but he has to prove it. It's not one of those that you just put the stamp on and say it's a guaranteed great season coming up for Rashid Shaheed. That said, the reason I want to talk about whether or not he can become a star is if we look at just the one sample size of the year-to-year growth from 2022 to 2023, it's quite fascinating. So let's break it down. Rashid Shaheed, rookie season, 28 catches, 488 yards, and 2 touchdowns. His second year with the Saints, 46 catches, so there's an improvement there. 719 yards, another bump for Rashid Shaheed, and then 5 touchdowns. And I would argue for Rashid, that's pretty impressive to have over 700 yards and 5 touchdowns in an offensive system that I've talked about it many times over the last several months. It wasn't great. You know, Pete Carmichael didn't establish an identity. The passing game took time to get going. And even for Rashid Shaheed, you can make the argument that him, like guys like Chris Olave, they really, hurt production-wise from the fact that this offense for the first 10 weeks of the season was just hot and cold. There wasn't really any consistency to the last, I'd say, 5 games where the Saints really picked it up in the passing game. So from a numbers perspective, he's gotten better. If you look at what he did last year, his 5 touchdowns on deep targets ranked 3rd in the NFL. The only wide receivers ahead of him, Tyreek Hill, Mike Evans. So you have Tyreek, who's arguably the best receiver in the game, and then Mike Evans, who I know us Saints fans don't like Mike Evans, but let's just call a spade a spade. He has been so consistent, so productive during his career. To be in a class with those 2 guys, that's a pretty good group for Rashid to be in. And if you look at the numbers, he's caught 68% of his targets. That's obviously great to hear, but it's not just about the numbers. I think for Rashid, there's a couple of factors to think that there is another step he can take to his game. So let's break them down. Let's start off with the first one. He's in an entirely different offense. And for some people, that might be scary. For Rashid Shaheed's case, I think this is an exciting time for him. You are going to be with an offensive coordinator that's going to value motion. That's a great thing for Rashid Shaheed. You're going to be with an offensive coordinator that's going to value getting the ball out of his quarterback's hand quickly. That's good for Rashid Shaheed as well, because I think if you look at Rashid Shaheed's route tree, which, by the way, has been a surprisingly polarizing subject on Twitter. I noticed over the last couple of weeks, there's been a lot of talk about the fact that he doesn't run routes well to the left side of the field. But if you look at what he runs to the right side of the field that he excels on, he's great with slants. He's great with dig routes. He's great on curls. And obviously the 9 route, just let him just go fly down the field. And there aren't many guys better than him at that. So I think if you're going to get the ball out quickly, advantage Shaheed. If you're going to, I'd say prioritize play action pass, which Clint Kubiak is going to do more than Pete Carmichael, that's advantage Rashid Shaheed, because if you get the run game going and then you dial up a play action pass and Rashid Shaheed gets behind the safety, I mean, it's game over. That's the guy for you on the Saints that's going to get you those, what I like to call those cheap touchdowns, those touchdowns that it's a one play quick hitter and all of a sudden you're back on the sideline enjoying a 7-0 lead. So those are advantages from Rashid Shaheed from a schematic standpoint. I think that's advantage. Advantage number 2, another year with Derek Carr. Look, I know Saints fans are not over the moon about Derek Carr. I'm not necessarily over the moon about Derek Carr, but I'd like to think that another year under this facility with getting that familiarity under each other, and maybe the system obviously is different and that you have to learn, but the cohesion between players should not change because of the system. If Derek Carr and Rashid Shaheed felt like they were improving their chemistry week by week last year, that shouldn't just get derailed by a new system. That should continue to grow. So I think the ability to work with Derek for another year, hopefully, should do wonders for both Derek Carr and Rashid Shaheed. So that's number two. Number three, I am a big believer on did you get better year by year? And again, like I said, it's only a 2-year sample size because we have 2022 and 2023. But you see it with Rashid Shaheed. It's not one of those players that you look at the end of the season and go, oh, wow, he had 700 yards. That's surprising. Like, you know that when Rashid Shaheed's getting his targets, when he's prioritizing the offense, he really gets it going. And he can be that guy that changes the complexion of a game in an instant. I think to the Indianapolis Colts game, there was an opportunity. I think to the Texans game, had Derek Carr hit him in stride, that might help the Saints kind of break that game open. Unfortunately, they were unable to. So you see it on screen. So the year-to-year growth so far, it's only 2 seasons, but it's been there. Like I said, to go from 400 yards to 700 yards, 2 touchdowns to 5 touchdowns, 28 catches to 46. That is good progression. Love to see that part for Rashid. And then the fourth one, it might sound silly, but he is an impending restricted free agent next year. And what better way to ensure that the Saints are going to match whatever offer comes your way, or other teams are going to throw a nice offer sheet your way, than having a really good 2024 season. So the motivation is there. The chemistry should be there. Having a play caller who's going to prioritize your skill set, and boy, it's an intriguing one because he has that blazing speed. I think it's there. And I don't even think this is a Saints homer type of take to say that Rashid Shaheed can be that breakout star for next season. A couple of weeks ago, just scrolling through, and Pro Football Focus, which again is more of the national perspective, but it's a national scope, asked fans to give out their take for who's going to be the breakout player of the year, or breakout wide receiver, I should say. And the guy that they put as the cover photo for that was Rashid Shaheed. So he is on people's radars outside of New Orleans, which is really nice to see. And I'm glad he's getting that recognition. So I think it could all build for Rashid. And before I kind of close this out, because I obviously you can tell that I am very passionate about what this guy brings to the table, and I do believe that he could take that next step. What I will find interesting is I'm one of those people that I don't think sports books tell everything. Their lines are set for a reason. People win bets for a reason. They also lose bets for a reason. But I find it fascinating for two things. Not every sports book has a line out yet for Rashid Shaheed on over under yards. And the ones that do, it's pretty conservative. It's around like 700 yards. And I feel like Rashid Shaheed can crush that number. And I'm not saying Rashid Shaheed's going to have 1,000 yards, 1,200 yards. Like, I think that's a little bit ambitious. But if you come here today and say, Chris, what's your prediction? I honestly think Rashid Shaheed can be a guy that gives the Saints, 900 yards receiving, 7 touchdowns, and makes a lot of big plays. Like, why can't he do that? Like, we know the talent's there. We know the speed's there. We know, at least when it comes to running on the right side of the field, running towards the right side of the field, there aren't many guys better than him at that. And like I mentioned before, on deep targets, hauling in touchdowns, Tyreek Hill and Mike Evans are in his class. So, I think that there's got to be something there that, I don't know why the number's so conservative, but I also question why some sports books haven't even put out a number yet. Do they feel like, man, we don't want to jump the gun yet and put out a false number? We want to see how it plays out. That very well could be it. So Rashid Shaheed entering his third year with the Saints. I've talked about fair expectations for Chris Olave in a previous video. So if you missed that, you can check it out on our channel here at Boot Crew Media. But I think Rashid Shaheed it might be a little bit more interesting because Chris Olave has reached that point in his career very early where he's a good player. Now you're wondering, can he be a great player? For Rashid Shaheed, I think he is a solid role player. I think this is the year, though, for him to take that next step. And all of a sudden, we're talking about him as one of those dynamic playmakers or one of those lethal deep threats in the NFL. I think he's that good, and I think he can take that step. So Rashid Shaheed, I'm going to say, can he give you 900 yards and 7 touchdowns next season? If he does, again, that is climbing up the ladder, doing a good job of progressing year to year. But we'll see. Let me know what your prediction is going to be for Rashid Shaheed this year. Do you think he gets close to 1,000? Do you think it's around the same of what he did this year? Comment below and I'll get back to you. But until then, guys, that's going to do it for this edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast, the destination for the Who Dat Nation.